BC tenants win again. Or do they? All right, I got some new words for this regulatory change, and you're gonna hate it or you're gonna love it. But it is what it is. So the BC government has decided to change the tenancy laws in favor of the tenants once again. This time, they are launching a portal that will provide more transparency for tenants. And I believe what it is essentially going to be is that now when a tenant is evicted from the home, they will actually be able to see if a new tenant gets placed into that home. Not exactly sure. It's something along the lines of that. And then this way they'll be able to tell if they were wrongfully or, properly evicted from the home, because if they get kicked out of the home that they were renting and then suddenly 3 months later there's a new tenant in there, you're gonna know that you were wrongfully evicted. Now, first off, I actually agree with this. I think there should be more transparency. I don't think tenants should be wrongfully evicted. I think that's a good thing. Now, on top of this portal, back in the day, before this, the proper way to evict a tenant was to, have one of your family members move in, and they would actually need to move into that home. Maybe your daughter or whatever grew up and then they would move into that home. You would serve the tenant 2 months notice, they would vacate, and then your family member would move into the home. However, what landlords would be doing is that if they had a tenant that was, due to rent control, paying far below market rents and they wanted to get that tenant out of there so they could put a new tenant in at the new market rents, they would, move into the property for 6 months, or they would have, a family member move into the property for 6 months, and then after 6 months they would rent it out to a new tenant at the new market rents. So a lot of landlords probably were evicting tenants for the sole purpose of bumping up the rent on these properties. However, now the minimum amount of time that a landlord has to stay in the property, or a landlord's family member has to stay in the property, has gone from 6 to 12 months. And that's all fine because they want to deter landlords from obviously pulling these kinds of stunts. So far, so good for tenants. Now, there is a part of these new regulations that, in my opinion, is going to be problematic for everybody. And that is now the amount of notice that you will be required to give a tenant when you are evicting them. It is going from 2 months to 4 months. And here's the thing about the notice is that it has to be, right now it has to be 2 full months. So today is like January 11th, I believe. If I evict a tenant today, July 11th. If I evict a tenant today, the rest of July doesn't count. The full month doesn't start until August 1st, and then all of September, and then basically I'd be getting possession on October 1st. So now, when you're giving a tenant 4 months notice, it could potentially be pretty much 5 months until you get possession of that home. And here's the issue with this, right? Is that the reason why they're doing this is because it's rental supply is so low that it's getting difficult for tenants to find the next rental place to live in once they get evicted. Therefore, they need a little bit more time than 60 days. They need, 120 days or whatever it is to find that next rental. But I'd argue that it's difficult for tenants to find places to rent because of exactly regulations like this. If we didn't have any of these laws like rent control or all these regulations that favor the tenants to begin with, then we wouldn't need more laws and regulations that favor the tenants, because we would have a lot more rental supply. So the problem with this 4 month notice thing, right, at its root core, is that it's going to again restrict rental supply, and I'll tell you how it's going to do that. So currently right now, if you have a house that's rented under market value, like most of them are because rents have gone up so fast, right? If you have a tenant longer than a year, that tenant is likely paying less than whatever the current market rent is for that home, right? So let's just say you have a home where the tenant is paying less than market rents, right? When you go to sell this home, no investor is going to buy it, because why would an investor want to inherit your tenant that is paying less than market rents? They don't know anything about that tenant. They don't know if they keep the house clean, or if they damage the house, or how they act, or if they smoke inside, or anything about the tenant, right? And they can't trust your word on what you say about the tenant. And then the tenant's also paying less than market rent. So right off the bat, 25% of your buyer pool, you can count them out. They're not going to buy your property, right? Now, the people who will buy your property, the owner occupiers, a very large percentage of them aren't going to be able to wait 4 to 5 months to move into this property, right? That is a closing time that's too long, and it's too long for several reasons. Number one, if they sold their property, you know, they might have a month and a half, 2-month closing time, which is the most common right now, right? Maybe that will change, but they have a month and a half, 2-month long closing time. So if they buy your property, now they're going to be in between properties for 2 months. They have to go rent somewhere. It doesn't make any sense. They're probably not going to do that. Secondly, most lenders give you 90 to, I believe, 6 months, 90 to 120 days rate hold, I believe it is, on your interest rate. Well, if the closing time is up to 5 months, that doesn't leave you enough time really to go and find a property. Your rate hold is likely going to expire in the middle of that process, right? It is going to be harder for people to get financing to now buy these tenanted properties. But basically, as a landlord that has a tenanted property now your investment, real estate is already illiquid as it is super illiquid. It is next to impossible to sell. Of the overall 100% of the buyer pool, there is maybe like a small chunk of 20 to 30% of those buyers who will actually be in a position to buy your property from you. And basically what that does is it increases risk for landlords. If you have a tenant who's paying far under market rents and then a situation like interest rates going up 500% comes about and now you need to sell, well, what if there's no buyer there for your property and you have to keep dropping the price and dropping the price and dropping the price? This is what happens. This is increasing the risk for landlords, right? And basically in investing is everything kind of seems to equalize, right? Newton's law or whatever, what every force has an equal and opposite reaction, right? So when there's high risk, there's also high reward. When there's low risk, there's also low reward. So when you increase the risk for landlords, the reward is likely going to have to follow, and the reward is rental rates. So how I see this ending up for tenants is that because the risk has been increased for landlords, not right away, but what will probably happen is landlords are going to be like, wait a minute, I'm cash flow negative, interest rates are 6%, all these regulations are coming out, capital gains tax, all of these things are coming out all at once and just smashing landlords. And they're going to be like, the risk to reward doesn't make sense. I'm just going to not invest in real estate. And then we're going to have less rental supply. And again, you're going to have the same amount of people, if not more people, fighting over the existing rental supply that we have. And again, this is going to, over the long term, next couple of years, start to push up rents again. And then eventually, we will probably see an equilibrium in risk to reward again. And it'll probably be a combination of things. It'll be a combination of rents going up, interest rates coming down, maybe prices come down a little bit. Everything will kind of equalize to make that risk reward make sense again in the future. So basically what I'm saying here is that these regulations look great on paper. Half of these regulations that they're doing here, I'd say, okay, fair enough, sounds great, right? Like the portal and everything, excellent. But this 4 months to evict a tenant thing is going to make things worse down the road like it does every single time, right? They're trying to solve a long-term problem with a short-term solution, and then in the long term, it just ends up resurfacing even worse, like whack-a-mole, right? It's like you hit one problem and then it pops up over here, and every time you hit the problem, then the problems start popping up even faster, and then that's basically what our government has been doing. But anyways, that's my opinion. Pretty sure 50% of you are going to hate it, but that's the way that I see this. I'm not against tenants or anything like that. I just try to take a very logical standpoint of like, what is the actual result of this happening? And in fact, I think if they just didn't do this, it would be better for tenants and landlords. I think everybody would win if they just left it alone. But anyways, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel, like this video. I'm that Agent Kelly. I'm making moves to move you. Peace.